So what we're here to talk about is ride the wave, these major changes, these tidal wave of changes that are coming through in how companies are being run and some of the movements in both the people in the organization, the processes within the companies, and the technology that's being used. So this huge shift in our industry. At Ascentis, we talk about delivering tools for growth. That is a mission of ours, is to grow organizations and make them more effective and expand. And a lot of who we target today are smaller, mid-sized companies that are looking to grow substantially. So our vision is to deliver tools for growth. And what that means is two fundamental principles. One is an area we call Grassroots Training, and that is set to transform fundamentally how companies train their folks, and how do we expand the knowledge without having to build huge training organizations and do that more efficiently. And so the second is on the performance side, is change that fundamental relationship between the manager and the employee and build better leaders, and empower employees to actually help almost grow their managers as well, sort of that manage up concept. But it's the ultimate goal is to build better leaders, but we do that by really looking at that relationship between the manager and the employee and changing that at a real fundamental level. So those are the two areas of performance and development that we're aiming, and we're putting tools in place to do that, to deliver the tools for growth. So we talk about why do we need to grow. If most companies, when you talk about growth, they talk about two areas. They talk about growing revenue, so our top line growing up, or growing the operations. We need to grow our people, and they talk in terms of, we went from 100 people to 200 people, or we're growing at 20%, but they're focused on either the operations or the revenue. And what we tend to forget is growth isn't just about adding more and just keep throwing more on top, because the bottom line, everybody knows, is if you got a bad foundation, if you're building on sand, it all goes away. Now you've got attrition. So you're not really growing, you're just throwing new on top. But ultimately what we need to do is make sure we've got a good, strong foundation, whether that's your revenue or your operations folks or whatever. You need a strong foundation. And the way you do that is to shift your focus a little bit, not just to growing the revenue or the operations, growing your people. Because if the people get it, they know what you're trying to do, and they know how to do what you need them to do, the other things are going to come. So we tend to focus on growing your people. That gives you the strong foundation that the company can build on. So what are we talking about when we talk about tools for growth? We're talking most people, again, think of this revenue, but what we tend to forget about is how we grow. And the fact is that it takes people, right? We need to add people, or you need resources, bottom line. But then what we really do is we sort of forget about what we have today. And in particular with our clients in the small to mid-sized markets, you got people wearing many different hats and many different roles. We don't have teams of project managers or teams of HR folks. We've got a couple people, and I don't care what role it's in, resources is probably a challenge. So we've got to be more efficient and do things more effectively. And the problem with training is, if you really look, and we call this a training pyramid, and it really is a way to kind of identify where you need training in your organization. And we look at it at multiple levels. So there's core training that you need. We have a core competency list for skills like time management and communication skills, and some of the skills that everybody in the company needs to have. And you need to train some people, depending on their roles, on those core things. So there's this huge amount of training that everybody could use. There's also this next level for leadership. If you are in managerial roles or moving into manager roles, that says, how do I build teams? How do I grow my people? And I need to make sure that I've got the tools to do that. The third is position-specific training. It's getting more finite there. Then you've got product training, which can apply differently to different groups, company training. The market that's out there, that can be helpful, again, particularly for sales and marketing, but it can also have impact for others in the organization as well, for them to understand what's going on out there, the overall industry type training, vocabulary and whatnot. And then there's specific industry updates depending on if you're in a highly regulated industry, having that training. So this is meant to say, there's a ton of training that's needed, and we've got to find a way to get this training, have it organized, and do that really, really efficiently, because this can be overwhelming. And we kind of want to ignore that this exists, but it does. It's not going away. There is these massive amounts of needs out there. So that's why we need Grassroots. And the second area is the reason we need this, because current training right now is not working. And so it's meant to be a little bit humorous, and I when I do this with audiences, I watch people just start yawning tremendously, because it makes you, but the fact is, this is what most training is today. It's hours of training, listening to topics, and it gets boring, overwhelming. The other problem is that there's a lot of training that tries to be way intense and just sort of force tons of information all at once, and it's very immersive. And there's this idea of encoding specificity, which is a technical way of saying, that if training is most effective when it's delivered at the point that it's needed. If it's relevant to what I'm doing, I will retain more. And there's studies that'll show, and this is a very common training diagram, that shows that depending on the person's level of engagement, and it seems probably obvious and intuitive, but if I'm reading or if I'm listening to a lecture, I'll get some retention, but the retention increases dramatically when I'm actually down and engaging with the material and possibly teaching others as well. So, and it's a huge difference in terms of the retention from a 5% to 90%. So we've got to do things differently. So Grassroots, the fundamental concept is a simple six-step process that says first thing you can do within a company is assess what your training needs are. So whether you do this by department, what it's not meant to be is this huge exercise, but just get a simple list of what you think the skills are necessary for each group and what they need training at, and make that into a spreadsheet. That will serve as a foundation for creating competencies that we put in the system. Many companies over-engineer competencies. Our feeling is keep it simple, keep it relevant, come up with a short list, and let's address those. Next step is to use, whether you're using your phone or your desktop, but quickly evaluate who are your experts in the organization on that topic. And you'll see in the next screen that the rating system can be very simple, but we find out who are the top 1 or 2 people in each of those skills that could then go out and actually create training. And we've got some methods and some tools for being able to create training simply and quickly that we can then automate the distribution of. Then we've got the tools to assess the effectiveness of that training to make sure it did what it was supposed to do, and then rinse and repeat. Those tools now are available at any time. So we want to do this. The main idea here, though, is that you're leveraging the strengths of the people out in your organization, the people that do those things the best, to either find training that's out there or to create it. Either way. So this is the rating scale that we use to do this, and it's used both for finding out who can create the training as well as who needs the training. Rather than have a traditional 1 to 5 or your typical proficiency type ratings, this one says that at the 3 level, proficient is I'm adequate for that job or for that skill. Advanced is I'm an example setter. I'm doing it better than most. But the one that really matters is the expert or mentor. This is the person that you would either create the training or you can put them in front of a class to create it. Developing is the people that need the training. So once we've gotten the training created, we can quickly assign as needed that training. And at risk is certainly pretty simple. It's ones that are impacting my job and could put me at risk if I don't get it corrected. But we feel this is an intuitive way to use to both find the people to create it as well as who need it. The result is the second part of the equation of our vision, and that's the performance tuning. So now that I've got this great training created, I can then quickly come in to the tool. I can go to my competencies on my phone. I can quickly pick competencies for Larry's on my team. I can quickly rate it, say, hey, Larry needs to develop these skills. That will then assign the training, and Larry can then take the training. So that's step 2 for performance tuning. We'll talk about it momentarily. But ultimately, back to the original thing of changing the way companies train, we expect this to be culture changing. And one of the things that's interesting is Starbucks had done a thing a number of years ago where they set out to have people record videos on how you can create training for making the best cafe mocha, whatever. And they found that people were actually posting these things and competing with each other on who could do the best. Everybody's watching each other's video, and it changes the culture. When I'm creating a piece of work, putting it out there, people can rate it, and now I feel like I'm contributing to the success of the company. It can be culture changing in ways that we haven't even imagined yet. So that's really the intent. So what I want to move into now is the performance tuning. And we really want to get into performance tuning because of a number of industry challenges. One is that when it comes to the people, the workforce is definitely changing. Right now, if you look at the millennials and the folks coming into the organization, the idea is that they're lacking skills because they're raw, they're coming out of the classroom, but they're always wanting to learn. So we need to look at both the negative and the positive. The bottom line is the dynamics changing. They lack managerial courage, but they're extremely confident. So we confuse confidence with managerial courage. We think that they're so confident that, boy, they could lead a team. But there's something hard about giving feedback. And when you have that moment where you've got to address a performance need, they lack the managerial courage to do what's right in that moment. Extremely loyal, but only if you invest in them. If you don't, they're moving on. They have no problems moving on. This is not back in the day of I'll stay at a company for 20 years, unless you're showing the same commitment. Demanding constant feedback, but also willing to give it. The fact is they are very empowered, but you've got to enable it. You've got to engage them and say, here's something that you're going to be accountable for, and then let them go to it. And if you do that, they will rise to it. And this is driven, a lot of this is driven by caring more about the purpose. They want to contribute. They want to know how am I giving back to a higher purpose, whether it's a social need or even within the company. They want to feel like it's there's something more. And they're extremely technology dependent. No surprise to anybody, always having technology at their fingertips. So we've got to make sure that we're using the technology to enable that. And I show this last little image here because I thought it was really interesting. There's a bunch of information here. We won't go through all of it. But the one at the bottom, when you look at the different generations, it starts saying work is life. The baby boomers live to work. Generation X work to live. Millennials want to actually have fun at work. What a concept. I actually want to enjoy what I'm doing because I'm living it, and you expect me to work 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day. I better be having fun. And the line has become blurred between work and life. We need to make sure that our tools are recognizing that and helping make work more enjoyable and contributing to that higher purpose, because they will demand it. So the second industry challenge right now is the current processes are not working. It's no surprise to people. We've been talking about performance reviews for years, but this is one posted by the Washington Post saying Accenture will get rid of annual performance reviews and rankings. There's a number of organizations that have also hopped on the bandwagon over recent years. Adobe, Gap, Medtronic, and Microsoft have also said they are abandoning annual reviews. 6% of the Fortune 500 companies have actually gotten rid of rankings, so no more putting people, giving them a 3.75 versus a 3.5 within the organization. And there's this rise right now getting rid of the overall scores, so no more am I giving any type of thing saying, hey, you are a 3. Fundamental, I think it's important for all of us to know, are we meeting expectations or not? But having a score attached to me as like I can be summed up in a number is really, people are recognizing it's contributing negatively rather than positively. Eliminating all ratings altogether is another thing we're seeing. I still think we don't want to necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater. The idea is that doing that as an annual event does not work, but being able to rate certain skills or certain goals or things like that when it matters and when it's relevant can be very important. So the bottom line is a lot of things are changing. The fact is annual reviews are just not working in their current form, and so we need to change that. The last is technology is shifting, and this is such an important point, that the expectations for technology anymore is that things need to be super sophisticated, but they need to look super simple. And it's really a visual in how things are presented. So companies like ours have to work really, really hard to make things look simple, even if they're not. And if you look back to the original days of technology, the Rio here on the left, tons of features. I compare it to the sports watch that nobody knows how to use all the functionality of sports watch. Looks great, looks really cool. Wow, I can do so much. But the fact is, there are things that looks far simpler that can do far more. And the iPod is certainly a great case of it. But the fact is that way too many software packages are over-engineered to do a lot of cool stuff that looks great in demos. But is it reality? Is it practical? Am I going to need training on my training software? And those are things that we need to get rid of. And the third area here is that interconnectivity is expected. Everything's got to talk to each other, whether it's to Facebook, LinkedIn, to the other systems in my company. The new baseline is everything needs to talk. And so that puts on great challenges on us. The bottom line, though, is less is more in terms of how it's presented to the user, and so we need to make a change and impact that. And so that's really what performance aims to do. Performance tuning aims to take all of these trends that are going on and say, how can I more effectively, in the moment, in real time, rate a person's performance on what matters, something very specific, give the managers the tools to do that so they will take action and it will actually happen, and do it more in the moment. Being able to address in real time and with relevancy specific goals, specific accomplishments that are going on, and feedback that's needed, the skills ratings. If I need to rate something in the moment, I can, and then I need to administer training in the moment. So a couple additional points on performance tuning and why it's needed, and to really drive the point home, is that number one, everybody is different. So I can have two salespeople in the same role. I can have a leader leaders in the same role, but the reason they're effective could be very different. In this illustration here, I've got one manager that's very effective because they're visionary. They can kind of draft people in and get them to follow whatever they need to do. There's some that are very effective in providing directions, very specific directions, and making sure projects are well, tightly managed. Whatever the skill is that makes you effective at sales, customer service, being a leader, we need to identify those skills and leverage those skills throughout the organization, and not focus on the things that they necessarily can't do if those things aren't really holding them back. So we've got to be very, very deliberate in what we're addressing. But everybody is different in why they are or aren't successful. But the fact is also nobody's perfect either. So the thing I like to talk about is when somebody's in an interview, we look at them, we finally find that candidate, they are perfect. Like, I have found the one. Here we go. Everything is wonderful. But then we have the moment of truth. The first time they do something that we go, oh my gosh, did they really do that? About the moment of truth. It's like, what did I do? And that's the most time that people tend to break down. So, out of humor, I use the Miley Cyrus example, because Miley Cyrus used to be perfect and is wonderful, and then we all know what's happened in recent months. And the fact is, boy, if somebody had addressed some of the performance needs early on, might have had a different outcome, and could she still be perfect? But we didn't. So but in that moment of truth, what actually happens? The manager steps back. Maybe they have a conversation saying, hey, we need to talk about, that sales call. We need to talk about that issue. We might, depending on what their confidence level is in the manager, Chris, they might do that. They might suggest training if it's available. Maybe they follow up after a certain amount of time, because they might not want to bring up that bad topic, but typically we don't do some real follow-up on that specific incident. So what ends up happening is, ultimately, we end up in a performance improvement plan, or what I like to call as an RIP, not a PIP, because we all know how that goes. But the fact is, what if I didn't treat that one incident? What if I didn't ignore it? Or what if I didn't treat it like it was the biggest thing in the world, and actually just very purposefully had a conversation, had some tools to address it, and then actually did a little bit of follow-up? Because the bottom line is, everybody, whether we think they know they did something or whether they're doing something in general, the bottom line is everybody wants to know how they're doing. Am I making my boss or my company happy? And if you don't, they're going to assume it, and they will form their own opinion. And that's the bottom line. So, if you look at your team and say, overall, how is everybody doing? The fact is each one of them in their mind is saying, am I doing a good job? And if you haven't told them at some time and doing that regularly, they are forming that opinion. And it's just a case of whether you're letting that build up, because nobody is perfect. So that's why we need performance tuning. The real benefit here, we tend to show this image here quite a bit, is that if you concentrate on the essence of performance tuning and say, within any company, you have got your base of high performers. There's usually a small select few that are really crushing it, going above and beyond. We need to leverage what they're doing great, what makes them exceptional salespeople, makes them exceptional operational folks. Leverage that to build up others, and then leave them alone. On the low performers, we've got to be more deliberate in developing those specific skills that are holding them back. That's put them in this lower bucket or dismiss them. But ultimately, if I've leveraged my top folks, it's really about taking this middle group and how do I move that whole group up a notch. And that's where the real benefit comes, is addressing specific skills here that can take people up. But I've got to do it leveraging the people that are exceptional in certain areas. And then ultimately, we got to make sure that we're assessing whether it's actually having an impact. So we believe in monitoring what matters. So a lot of companies, and we've got tools to look at things like participation. Are people doing the behaviors that we want them to do? Are they taking the training that we expect them to take? Is it delivering the results? And more importantly, we talk about what we call manager effectiveness. And this is a whole new set of tools that can really address in the areas that if I shift to the real time, now I've got tools to monitor, who has given feedback in the last 30 days, who's rated a skill as developing, and followed up on it in 90 days. So it's not just about rating it, it's about if I let something lapse, because if you rate something a 2, then there should be some follow-up action. So I want tools that actually monitor aged competency ratings. So if I've rated something as developing or at risk, I want to see, has anything been done in the past 30, 60, or 90 days to follow up on that. If I've, in terms of self-manager rating discrepancy, I want to see areas where the employee rated themselves really high and the manager rated them low, or the manager rated them way higher than the employee rated. So look at those outliers, stop looking at all this data, focus on the outliers or where there might be an issue with a manager, because it might be the manager that's got the issue. So we want to look at manager effectiveness and see where there's disagreement between the employee and the manager, or where the manager is not actually taking action more real time to give the feedback that's necessary. So we care about manager effectiveness and have a whole new set of tools to be able to do that. So that is performance tuning and grassroots training. We appreciate the time.